Hey everybody, it's Retro DM Ray. Hey, I'm glad to be back with y'all. I'm glad you are back with me as we do another video for the basic D&D or Back to Basics Saving Our Game series. And I want to say, first of all, last week or a couple of weeks ago when I posted, it was concerning my busyness in life and vacation time and those kinds of things, and I wasn't going to be able to do a video, but I posed a thought process to you, which was, if you look at modern systems and older systems and good stories, what are the components of that are necessary? And I posed that what was necessary for that was good mystery, good intrigue, conflict, and lethality. And I think those things are key components to being able to tell a good story. And thus, I think, because role-playing games are a storytelling game, so to speak, then I think those components are also necessary for a good one of those. So, in keeping with that today and continuing to go through Moldvay's Basic or BX series, but specifically the B in the BX, Moldvay Basic, I thought I would turn to what he gives in his book in page B59 and B60. If you have that PDF document from Drive-Thru RPG, please turn there and take a look at that. If you have a physical copy, congratulations, those are rare. Turn there and follow along with me if you'd like as I kind of read through this page and a half, and we'll talk a little bit as we go through here. So let me get this out of the way first. If you like these videos, you're learning something, you feel that they're creative, they're imaginative, they affect you in some sort of a positive way, and you'd like to continue to watch them, please click the like, the subscribe, click the bell icon so you'll be notified whenever we get new videos up on the channel. And if you would like to help my family and I out during this COVID time, you can also follow the link in the description for the PayPal tip jar. Drop a tip in there and I will say thanks in advance for that. All right, so let's get to our reading. Page B59, I'm going to start at the top, the sample expedition. The situation. This party includes 4 second-level characters and a first-level dwarf. Morgan Ironwolf, a female fighter, the Caller. Silverleaf, an elf. Frederick, a dwarf. Sister Rebecca, a cleric, and Black Dougal, a thief. After equipping themselves, these characters have journeyed to the Haunted Keep and discovered the trap door in Room 4, leading to the second level. As a Caller, Morgan relays the party's actions to the DM after the characters decide what they want to do. Now, as I said in another video, we never did this as party members in the old school days whenever I played back in the 80s, early 80s and beyond. But when I did go to some conventions, specifically I went to Gen Con in Lake Geneva at one point, and there were so many people and so much noise and stuff going around that there was a Caller that sat close to the Dungeon Master so that he could even just hear what was going on there for the most part. So we did use that in convention style, but we never used it in our own gameplay whenever we played just personally in our small groups. But there is that aspect of it here represented in the book. So here's how it starts out. DM. Having killed the hobgoblins, you open the trap door and find a set of stairs going down to the south. Morgan. We're going down the stairs. DM, after 30 feet, you reach a round landing with 2 sets of stairs. One goes down to the east, and the other goes down to the west. Morgan. Frederick looks down the east staircase, and Silverleaf looks down the west one. What do they see? Now, immediately, let me stop there for a second and say something. You'll notice that the first thing that they're doing here is they're saying, hey, we're going to look down there, and what do we see? We're not going to be asking for, can I make a perception roll, which is what is in modern systems typically, and what I hear and have heard hundreds and hundreds of times of various online play. That's a playing the sheet thing. Old school didn't do that. We didn't have that. You just asked the Dungeon Master, what do you see? The Dungeon Master was the one who was in charge of the game, so they were responsible for answering that question, and your job as the player was to ask all kinds of questions like that and be able to do whatever it is you thought of that you could try to do instead of looking down at your sheet and seeing what the sheet told you could or could not do. So you see that right there. DM, the party's torches mess up their infravision, so they can only see 20 to 30 feet. The west stairs go down 10 feet and turn sharply south. The east stairs go down at least 30 feet. Also, Fred smells a rank, musty odor coming up from below. Frederick, hey everybody, there's something down here. I don't like it. Morgan, anyone want to go down the east stairs? Okay, we're going down the west stairs. DM, you go 10 feet down the west stairs. It turns south to 20 feet. 30 foot down. The stairs end and you step into a 20-foot wide corridor that goes east and west. You see a door 10 foot up the west corridor on the north wall. Rebecca, mapping. That was the north wall? DM, yes, the door is in the north wall. Now, what you see right there, when it says Rebecca mapping, I actually got stuck with that chore, as I said in another video, very early on, and I first hated it, but as I got to do it more and more, I really liked it, the uniqueness of it. But as I look back on all of our old games, too, when we made those maps, and I made a large part of them, but when we made those maps, those were things that stuck with your character. You remember that. You kept them with your character sheets. They were keepsakes and mementos of your adventures together. And sometimes other party members would say, hey, can I have the map? I want to keep it with my guy or my gal or whatever. And we just did that. And so I think that's lost in today's systems incredibly with digital mapping and online mapping with the various online platforms and animated mapping and those kinds of things. I think that's just a lost aspect of the game, that it would be neat to recover that, because there's just a level of involvement, a verisimilitude, if you will, of taking what you've heard and putting that down on hex paper, or putting that down on square line paper or graph paper, if you will, just to be able to translate that, because as you get deeper and deeper and deeper in the dungeon, you needed to have good mapping, or at least decent mapping, so you could find your way back out. And today that's just really not a necessity. The DMs will tend to say, hey, so you find your way back out. And I think that takes something away from the game, some of the mystery as well, and some of the chance that maybe you drew it wrong and the DM didn't fix it, and that's okay. Anyway, Morgan. So let's continue on. We're going to the door. Silverleaf, Black Dougal, and I will listen. DM, as you step into the corridor, a breeze from the west makes your torches flicker. Rebecca, is it strong enough to put them out? DM, no, not yet. Morgan, then we'll listen at the door. DM, rolling 3 dice for listening. You don't hear anything. Now again, they're asking for information, but those types of rolls are actually done by the DM behind the screen, and there's a reason for that, because there's mystery, and because you don't want to know, and you shouldn't know whether you heard anything or not until the DM tells you what it is you hear and when you hear it, rather than you look down at the dice and you can go, oh, I didn't hear anything, or, oh, I think I heard something because I rolled this or that. I just think that's also lost in the new system as well, and it's hard to train yourself out of that when you get involved in that kind of play again. Anyway, moving on, Morgan, after a discussion with the others, will leave the door and go down the passage to the west. DM, after 30 feet, there's a side passage to the south, 10 foot wide. The main corridor continues west. You'll notice the breeze is stronger and your torches are beginning to flicker even more. Frederick, I don't like this. Dougal, you've got improvision. Morgan, we'll take the side passage. DM, okay, after 50 feet, you find doors to the east and west. The passage continues south. Morgan, Silverleaf, Red, and Black Dougal will listen at the west door. DM, rolling. Black Dougal hears muttering voices. Dougal, do I understand them? I speak common, orc, goblin, and elvish. DM, after deciding on a chance for Dougal to recognize goblin language through the heavy door and then rolling. No, the voices aren't loud enough. Morgan, we're getting ready for combat. Fred and I will force the door. Dougal, I'll guard the rear. DM, okay. The party is set with Black Dougal guarding the rear. Rolling to see if the door is forced. It opens. You see half a dozen goblins. Frederick, let me at him. Remember, he's a dwarf, right? DM, you can't be surprised, but they can be. Rolling for surprise. No. Roll for initiative, please. Morgan. Fred rolled a 2. DM, rolling. The goblins have the initiative. Rolling reaction for the goblins. They must have heard you, Fred. They charge, yelling, kill the dwarf, chop them to hamburger. Combat is now resolved, morale checks taken, etc. The goblins fight until all are dead. It is now time to check for wandering monsters, but the DM's rolls indicates that none appear. Morgan. Okay, what does the room look like? We're checking the floor and ceiling too. Now, notice in old school, unlike maybe in your new school games, I don't know if that's the way you play, but in the old school games, it was an absolute necessity if you were a fairly competent player at all that you wanted to search every square inch of that room. You wanted to ask everything that was there. You wanted to look around at every nook and cranny because you didn't know if there was a secret door, if there was a trap, if there was some hidden object in the room, if there was some illusion going on, if there was a sliding or shifting wall, all of those sorts of things. So you asked to search everywhere and looked on the ceiling as well, because that was always a great place for the crafty DM to hide the next ooze that would fall on you, or green slime that would drip down, or spider, or what have you. That might come from the ceiling. So it's just good questioning here that's going on. Good investigative player technique. DM, the room is 6-sided, 30 foot on a side, and 20 feet high. The door you came in is the only one you see. There's nothing unusual about the floor or ceiling. Besides the bodies of the goblins, there's a wooden box along the northeast wall and a pile of old rags in the north corner. Morgan, Silverleaf is checking for secret doors. Fred is looking for traps. Black Dougal is examining the box, and Sister Rebecca is guarding the door. I'm prodding the rags with my sword. Any movement? DM, after rolling for the appropriate chances, Silverleaf notices that one of the stone blocks in the southwest wall is slightly discolored. Again, remember, Silverleaf is an elf, right? And their chances of noticing things like that was considerably higher, just like the chances for dwarf. Remember, race is class. And dwarves were able to notice stonework traps, shifting walls, sliding stone things, that type of thing. Okay. Black Dougal is examining the box, and Sister Rebecca is guarding the door. I'm prodding the rags with my sword. Any movement? DM, after rolling the appropriate chances, Silverleaf notices that one of the stone blocks in the southwest wall is slightly discolored. Fred does not see any traps. The box is the size of a small trunk. It is latched, but not locked. Morgan, nothing move in the pile of rags? Frederick, I want to have a look at that block. Silverleaf. Morgan, Fred examines the block. Frederick, for traps? Morgan, sorry, Fred, for traps. Dougal, I'm looking for traps on the box too. DM, rolling for Fred, even though the block is not trapped. The DM also rolls for Dougal's find traps ability. The roll indicates that Dougal has failed to find the poison needle in the latch. Neither of you finds a trap. Frederick, I'm pushing, pulling, and trying to twist the block. Again, you see that just trying everything you can try while you're in the room, seeing if something happens, right? DM, when you push it, a secret door opens in the west section of the southwest wall. You see a 5-foot corridor that goes south for 30 feet and ends at a door. Morgan, Fred and Silverleaf will guard the secret door, and Black Dougal will open the box. I'll search through the rags. Anything that looks like a cloak or boots? Interestingly enough, of course, that's player character knowledge, and some people today would say, oh my gosh, you can't have characters doing that. But that's the way we played, because characters, we'd played before enough times to know, hey, there's some possibility of some, boots of speed, or boots of jumping, or boots or cloak of the elven kind, or all those different types of items. So it's okay to ask those kinds of questions, and that's fine in this system, as you can see. The Dungeon Master has no qualms about it whatsoever. Because he says, going on, Black Dougal, you find out that you missed a tiny discolored needle in the latch. Roll a saving throw versus poison, please. Dougal rolling. Missed it. DM. Black Dougal gasps, poison, and falls to the floor. He looks dead. Okay, there's something lethal for you right there, exactly, right? Immediately you see, even in just a sample dungeon expedition, a character's already dead. Very interesting, and that's just the way that it was played back then. There's another game, Dungeon Crawl Classics, and you start out at level 0 characters, and man, you make a pile of them because most of them are going to die before you actually get to be officially starting as adventurers in level 1, and I like that idea too, that level 0 concept and how that plays out. I'm not sure the new systems do that very well, but maybe you do. Anyway, let's continue on. And you're going to see something here right now that's just very hilarious and stuff that happened in our game too. Frederick, I'm grabbing his pack to carry my treasure in. So like, oh man, you really care for Dougal, right? Rebecca, I'm giving Black Dougal the last rites of my church. So obviously the cleric does. DM, okay. Meanwhile, Fred, you find the box is full of silver, perhaps 2,000 pieces. Morgan, you do find a pair of old boots, but nothing like a cloak. Morgan, Fred'll dump the silver and look for hidden compartments in the box. I'll try on the boots and see if I can move silently. We could use a pair of elven boots. So again, that player character knowledge, asking those questions, hey, we want something here, right? And also, interestingly enough, immediately asking another probing question, looking around to see if there's a box or a hidden compartment in the bottom of this trunk, right? DM, rolling another wandering monster check. Because remember, in BX system, they occur on a regular basis unless you change that in your game. If you continue with this just by the rules as written order, there's a constant rolling for wandering encounter, so that the game isn't slowed down. It's on an even pace regularly, and there's always a sense of worry, anxiety, doubt, fear. Those things are all important, I believe, as I said before, and the conflict that continues as you struggle to get through this dungeon, right? Fred finds a false bottom in the box. It contains another smaller box of carved ivory that holds 2 gold bracelets set with jade. Frederick, how valuable do they look? DM, you think the jewel case is worth 100 gold pieces and each bracelet is worth about 600 gold pieces. Morgan seems to be moving very quietly. So right there, the DM is saying, this is about what they're worth. Let's just go ahead and write it down so we can move on. Yeah, you don't need to be a jeweler or a gem cutter, make some crazy rolls. You just, here's what it is. Let's move on. That's not the important part. The important part is the rest of the dungeon and the adventure and what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, right? And then he immediately tells her, hey, you're moving silently. There's no crazy stuff that they need to do to figure that out again, right? Morgan, great. I'll put the case and jewels in my pack and then watch the door as the others take turns filling their packs with silver. Frederick, I'll dump out Dougal's pack and fill it with coins. DM, okay, the loading will take 4 turns. The DM makes the wandering monster checks. As the party finishes loading, a large party of bandits approaches. Since Morgan is watching the door, the DM gives a very high chance that the bandits will be heard. As you finish loading, Morgan hears the tramp of many booted feet coming from the north. It's getting louder. Morgan will beat a hasty retreat through the secret door. Fred will go first, then me. Silverleaf is next, and Sister Rebecca will bring up the rear. She'll spike the door shut behind us. Frederick, before we go, I grab Dougal's body. We can't leave him behind. So apparently Frederick has a heart now, right? And you can imagine that around the table of how much junk he was getting from the other player. Hey, what are you doing, man? And then, well, I guess I'll grab you and bring you along, right? DM, okay. As you reach the end of the secret passage, you hear a cry of discovery and a babble of voices from the room behind you. Black Dougal's tools and rations have been discovered. Morgan, what? Didn't anyone bring his things along? All, no. Morgan, nuts. We're going to be more careful from here on, gang. Anyhow, Fred will listen at the door. I have my bow ready. DM rolling. Fred, you don't hear anything. Morgan, Fred will force open the door. DM rolling. It opens. You see a square room, 30 foot on a side and 20 feet high. Your door is in the west section of the north wall. You don't see any other exits. The room appears to be empty. Rebecca, what about behind us? DM, the voices have died down and you don't hear anything. Morgan, we'll search the room very carefully, taking at least 2 turns. Silverleaf and Sister Rebecca are looking for secret doors, and Fred is looking for shifting walls. I'm guarding the rear. DM, rolling for wandering monsters. Okay, you search for 2 turns. You don't find anything, but something finds you. A secret door that Silverleaf and Sister Rebecca didn't find in the south wall opens, and 2 hobgoblins stroll in. At this point, the time scale shifts from turns to rounds. This encounter is the example at the end of the combat section in page B28. So this is in the middle of the book here, and then you would go back to page B28 and take a look and read through that as well, which we will do in the next video. But I want to touch on something that comes right after this. This next section on B60 is Dungeon Mastering as a Fine Art. And first of all, I want to say this. What Moldbase says right here is incredibly significant. 2 things. One is the good news. The other one is, for some folks, not such good news, especially in today's gaming world. But we'll get to the bad one after we get to this good one. The good one is everyone is here to have fun. So when you're playing Dungeons & Dragons, when you're playing whatever role-playing game you're playing, are you there so that everyone is there to have fun? And that includes not only all the players, but the Dungeon Master as well. Okay. It says the DM should make the adventure seem as real, quote unquote, to the players as possible. There's the verisimilitude. There should be those anxious feelings. There should be that buildup of emotions and that mystery and that charge and that energy involved. And it should be as real as possible, given the fact that it's a fantasy game and given the fact that you shouldn't be playing you, or you shouldn't be playing a sheet. You should be playing a character that you have imagined in your mind and created on the sheet, and then you're imaginatively playing under the control of the dungeon master who's in charge of the game, but you're in charge of your character and the things in which your character does and doesn't do, right? Okay. Here it says, all should avoid getting stuck in long discussions about rules or procedures. Man, that smacks of some of the modern systems as well, that they're so crunchy, they're so involved, they can be so nitpicky in some ways, and maybe your games are not, and if you don't play that way, that's cool. If that doesn't bother you, that's cool. But just the fact that you don't sit around and stop the game and pull yourself back out of the immersion just so you can have a bunch of rules discussions and a bunch of procedural discussions. And it says here the game should move along with humor as well as excitement. And I think that can be done, but it's done best with what it says in the paragraph right above that. And here's the bad one that people tend to balk at on a regular basis in today's gaming community talk that I've read and I've heard a bunch of times over and over. The DM is the boss, is what it says. The DM decides how these rules will be used in the game. A good DM talks about problem areas with the players and considers reasonable requests by them. Absolutely right. You like each other. You got together to play. Talk about these things. The DM's going to tell you everything all up front as far as how lethal it's going to be and what you can and can't have and what you can and can't create and can and can't do and how this works and that works and set it all up for you. And then he or she is going to run the game, and that's the way it goes. And then you have fun. You already know the information now up front, right? So he considers reasonable, or she considers reasonable requests by them. The players should realize, however, that the final decision is the DM's. Ouch. So I wonder if in today's systems, they are designed in such a way, it seems like to me, over the year that I've been playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and over the several years that I've been playing D&D 5th Edition, and other systems as well in my past, not just Dungeons & Dragons and not just D&D type of games, but space games and superhero games and those kinds of things. The newer systems tend to be, not all of them, but tend to be designed around taking that away from the Dungeon Master. For example, creatures have a level of challenge to them, and the Game Master or Dungeon Master's Guide specifically says don't throw these challenges at the characters. They have to be at this challenge rating because your party is at this level. But see, that's not like how a verisimilitude version of our world works. And I don't believe that it should work that way in a fantasy world either. I believe that in order for it to have good, genuine conflict, mystery, intrigue, worry, anxiety, and lethality, you run into what you run into. What the dice say, either that the DM has rolled beforehand and written down, or what the dice say at the moment for a wandering monster. Whatever's there is whatever's there. The party always has the opportunity to try to run or to try to get out of that conflict with a charismatic response or a trick of deception or something like that, or an offer of payment to let us go, or any of those kinds of things. You don't have to just stand and be a murder hobo. So that challenge rating nonsense is just really not necessary, and it just changes the game, right? And it takes those things away from the Dungeon Master. It takes away his ability to be the one who makes the final decision in the game. It's not the players. And Mulvey even says, and it's not this booklet's. If a disagreement holds up play, he says, the DM may make a temporary decision and talk it over with the players when the adventure's over. If a player disagrees strongly enough, he or she may quit the game. It's up to the DM to create an adventure that the players can enjoy. The DM creates the adventures, and he's the boss. But He creates an adventure that the players can enjoy. So the point of it is not just that the DM is like Lord or God over them and they can't do anything without his or her purview or his or her say so. It's he's doing it in such a way that the players can enjoy the game and it doesn't get bogged down. There's not a bunch of junk rules and procedures all getting in the way. It's humor, it's excitement, it's fun. Now, I'm going to stop there with this particular video, but when I go back and read page B28, the next and last section that Molde gives of this party's adventures in the book, I'm going to come back and read a little bit more of this Dungeon Mastering as Fine Art on page B60, and then I think I might be done there after that next video. And I'm still going to talk about back to basics, but I think I'm going to move on to an entirely other system that I'm just really loving right now, and I've really gotten into. I know the creator of it. I have conversations with him. I've watched all of his videos. I've got all of the books for it, and I've gone through them already several times, and I've run it 2 or 3 times and played once on my own just as a solo thing. A little bit, and that is Basic Fantasy Role-Playing Game by Chris Gonnerman. So I'm going to actually be breaking that out, and actually I'm going to do what I haven't done on my channel before, which is I'm going to actually read through Basic Fantasy RPG 3rd Edition Rulebook, and I'm going to let you hear for yourself what I think is just a really outstanding old school game. I wouldn't say it's a retro clone of BX, but at the same time, I believe it is. It's the open gaming license, if you will. And I just want you to hear about that game and take it at a slow pace. So we'll be reading through that book together, and then I'll be commenting along the way. And so I hope that you'll be looking forward to those coming as well. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for giving us a thumbs up, for clicking that bell icon. As I said before, if you do give a tip in the tip jar on PayPal, we really appreciate that. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching these. It encourages me to be part of this community with you and to share these types of things, and that somebody finds some value and some entertainment and some creativity in them. Again, as I always say at the end of all of my videos, first of all of these are always going to be G-rated. I don't believe language is necessary to be talking about these cool things like this, so I'll never do that. I will never steer you towards someone who is not G-rated, and if I do mention someone's podcast or YouTube channel or a person for you to look up and find and read about or listen to, I will always let you know what I think their rating would be. So you can always watch this with your family, your kids, and your friends and not be concerned at all about there being any expletives and all that other nonsense that I don't think is necessary in any good gaming conversation. But hey, that's just me. So I won't put anything in the link other than the PayPal tip jar below this. But just again, thanks a lot for listening. And hey, take care, and may all your rolls be nat 20s. Bye-bye.